Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Worth It Then Worth It Now. A bit of a side project where I go back to look at games of yesteryear, I suppose a year plus as far as age goes, but it's an opportunity for me to shout out things that I think deserve a second look and may not necessarily be contemporary, but I do line it up with a sale where possible. And today we're looking at Returnal, and that's on a fairly, half price sale, but it's an expensive game in the first place, so definitely worth at least having a look at. So Returnal is one of my favourite games to come out in the past few years, and while, I don't get involved in the console war, I do appreciate a lot of the PlayStation blockbuster titles of which this sits in. These kind of high production, cinematic, infrequent releases, but them coming across to Steam, again, much appreciated. I've got a bit of a beast rig. It's an opportunity for me to see what it can do. And Returnal still holds up incredibly well. But the really important thing about it, this game is important. God, I don't want to sound like that sort of wanker. But the point to note when it comes to Returnal is it's made by Housemarque, who were the little train that could, essentially. They've been an indie darling of the PlayStation network for a long time. Like, I think they did Resogun as a PS4 launch title, and that's where they come from. They come from these sort of neon-fueled, bullet hell type arcade experiences, and they've always been really good, but they knocked it out of the park because PlayStation threw, fuck you money at them, and this is what they gave them back. But essentially, really the one and only AAA roguelite entry that we've seen, which is a little tragic, but again, who knows, there could be a whole bunch of them in the pipeline being developed. This is wishful thinking. It takes 5+ years to develop a AAA title these days, but I would have really hoped that this would set the pace for a few other AAA copycats at the very least, because it's such a great format, and really, from what I understand, this was just well received by everyone everywhere, and it was fun. I don't want to be that wanker, I listened to indie music before you listened to that band, I knew they were cool before you. We've all known that guy, but it was fascinating watching the indie world collide and all the mainstream podcasts or PlayStation talking heads and that sort of stuff when Returnal came out going, this is wild, I couldn't even comprehend or imagine this sort of genre, whereas every second game I play is a bloody roguelite these days. So again, if you're part of my audience, and you're in this orbit, there's a good chance that you're already familiar with roguelites, the idea being that the deck is kind of stacked against you. Roguelite with a T is much more about what you call meta upgrades, where it's to say that you play the game and it's supposed to be run-based. It's not some 8-hour campaign that you beat in one sitting or in one life, so with save points. It's smaller micro runs. God, it feels strange explaining this, but as you get your head kicked in by the very fast ramping enemies, you will also get upgrades that will benefit your subsequent runs, and this can be handled. There's examples of it doing well and terribly. This is a great example because a lot of it is very narrative. You're playing as this cat lady, Selene or Karen or whatever her name is, but I say that she's a Karen archetype, but she doesn't behave like one in that she's actually likable, or rather just objective focus in the moment. What the hell is going on? Let's solve this problem. And you'd expect that from some sort of professional astronaut type. And so, she's a bit perplexed, let's say, of the fact that there are corpses of her everywhere, and, it doesn't really know where am I in this cycle. And you stagger through this. I don't want to necessarily say it's Geiger-esque, it's not like that kind of alien phallic imagery, but it does lean towards more Prometheus-esque, I suppose, if we're going to stick in that alien space of world and environmental design. It does have that dark, gloomy, with a tinge of blue, oppressive, kind of scary sci-fi environment. It's really good, and it contrasts as well against, all her bright, white, clean, earth sci-fi stuff. But you do these runs, and you get your head kicked in, you slowly increment, and you learn what's going on through story, etc. And, rinse and repeat and repeat and repeat. And the core of making that work, because on paper, when pitched incorrectly, that doesn't sound like fun. But if the core loop is outrageously fun, who cares? You will just keep queuing up for more and more runs. And that's exactly what's going on here. And all of this comes full circle to the Housemarque indie fundamentals in that, yeah, okay, this is a sexy, high profile, high res texture, AAA smorgasbord for the eyeballs, but when you start playing it, it's still a Housemarque indie sensibilities, bullet hell type game. And it translated really well, and I really do think this was the first one of what started a bit of a trend, because you see this a bit more nowadays where, you know, we've covered a few recently, like Void Breaker. There's a lot of games following suit where they're taking the bullet hell sensibilities of what would be more familiar indie type games, you know, side-scrolling shooters. Resogun was a good example, but they've done a whole bunch of different stuff. But, you know, even you look at your Vampire Survivors, things like that, bullets everywhere going nuts. It's usually more of a, let's say, a 2D perspective, but certainly not in a first or third person AAA space, and they bring it across here, and it works incredibly well. And yeah, like I said, it seems to have been inspiration for many subsequent examples, copycatting it, drawing inspiration. But yeah, look, there's a really cool carrot on a stick mystery. What's going on here? It metes out not just like incremental upgrades. You know, I could wax and wane forever about the plague that is roguelite games on the industry these days. Because, you know, 1% to lightning resistance or whatever does not make for a satisfying feedback loop. But this manages to meld, like I said, the moment-to-moment gameplay with the bullet hell type mechanics that they've got the fundamentals on, the sort of little momentary tactical decisions of the itemization and interacting with, like there's even a sort of pseudo Dark Souls Bloodstain asymmetric co-op type thing. You've seen it in some games, maybe even Ubisoft games along the line, where I can't remember a great example off the top of my head, but where you will, you know, avenge someone's death. Or, you know, the Shadows of Mordor games, I'm pretty sure they did that. But the idea that they'll verse some sort of boss creature and you can verse it in turn to get a reward, and maybe they get a reward, and that sort of thing is in here as well. There's a lot of really cool stuff. There's some weapons that you pick up along the way. There's a do not get hit incentive in the gameplay layer, so you get these levels up to like 5 with pretty powerful incremental things, like the action reload bar that you use gets wider and wider, and your incomes in general are better, but as soon as you get hit it resets it, but you can build it up after a few more encounters. So this short-term strategic component as well. So it balances it from top to bottom is what I'm trying to say, I suppose. A masterclass in how to do what they've done here. And I can't remember the name off the top of my head, you'd have to look it up, but this same company just recently announced at one of their games shows, I think it might have been just the Game Awards, where they're not doing a sequel, but they're doing something else again. You know, it was all cinematics, you know, when they never show gameplay, but the idea seemed to be that it's an infinite time loop, and the inference is that, yeah, okay, I was hopeful that we would get other AAA companies maybe giving the roguelite space a red hot go, but I will settle for the next best, which is that Housemarque is going to still keep getting the fuck you PlayStation AAA money and doing the same thing again and again. And, you know, I'm glad it's not Returnal 2 and it's something slightly different, but I'm also glad that they're doing what looks to be, touch wood, another roguelite on the back of it. Anyway, look, I think this game is really quite excellent. It does round out that PlayStation meta, right, where they make Last of Us and Days Gone, and none of these games are bad. They're all quite wonderful, but they're all really the same. You know, a lot of the time they're third-person, cinematic, linear storytelling things, and this deviates quite a bit. Like I said, a bit of a trailblazer, an indie game in disguise with a, you know, billion-dollar paycheck attached to it. So check it out if you haven't. And again, if you're part of my regular audience or what have you, so you come here for the $5 roguelite type games, maybe this is just what you need. Check it out. Something to spoil yourself, a little bit more of a high society version of what we usually play with for dollars. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.